John, a man of 45, has lived a life surrounded by invisible walls of fear. Fear of death, fear of time slipping away, fear of the unknown. For years, he's hidden from these fears, not realizing that in trying to escape them, he's wasted his life. His days pass in a blur of uncertainty, each one blending into the next, with no real purpose or joy. Imagine living a life where time is your enemy, where every moment feels like it's slipping through your fingers. What would it be like? To fear time itself? To live in constant dread of the future? As John reaches 45, the weight of his fears becomes too heavy to ignore. He's staring at the reality he's been avoiding for years. A life spent not living. How much of your life would you waste if you feared living in the first place? John's eyes wander over the familiar walls of his home, the same walls he's seen day in and day out for the past 45 years. He has lived a life full of fear, not just of death, but of time itself. Every tick of the clock, every passing year has reminded him of everything he hasn't done, everything he's missed out on. Now, standing on the edge of his life, the weight of his choices comes crashing down. He has spent his entire life hiding from the things that scared him, taking no chances, avoiding change, never embracing the unknown. Now, in this quiet moment, he finally realizes that the most terrifying thing of all wasn't death. It was the fear that kept him from truly living. He had always looked at time as his enemy, something to be avoided, wasted, and feared. But now, with his years slipping by, he wonders, what could have happened if he hadn't been afraid to take a chance? What if he had embraced the world and lived boldly? Could he have been happy? The regret is unbearable. Every missed opportunity, every what if, clings to him like a shadow. He wonders how much of his life was lost simply because he was too scared to live it. Could it be true that he had wasted all his years living in fear of time instead of living with it? It is a day like any other except for one thing. The day John realizes how much of his life has slipped away from him. As he looks into his own reflection in the mirror, he is struck by a harsh truth. The face staring back at him is not the face of a man who has lived fully. It is the face of a man who has spent most of his life avoiding the very essence of living. Every wrinkle, every gray hair seems to echo a life spent in the shadows of his own fears. The truth hits him like a heavy punch. He has never really lived. He was so obsessed with avoiding the pain that accompanies loss, change, or death that he never embraced the gift of life itself. He never took risks. He never stepped outside of his comfort zone and followed his dreams. Rather, he hid behind the comfort of routine, allowing time to pass him by. John feels the burden of every single moment he could have had, but let slip away. The opportunities to love, to explore, to be happy, they are gone now, lost forever. And what's worse, he can never get those years back. Do you ever feel like time is slipping away from you? Does the realization hit you like it did John, when you look at your life and wonder what could have been? What would you do if you realized you had wasted so many precious years, never truly living the way you were meant to? Overwhelmed by regret and despair, John's mind searches for answers. He cannot help but feel that he cannot just go on, living with this hollow feeling within him, a sense that there has to be something more to life than just fear and regret. He feels that he must do something different, but he does not know where to begin. Desperate, he finds comfort in the unknown and goes into the deep jungle, which lies on the outskirts of town. The air smells fresh and thickly earthy as well, as being drenched by rain. Even the sounds of the wild somehow seem to breathe through the branches. The more he treks through the jungle, the more John becomes aware of an unfamiliar singing voice. Soft at first, like a whisper in the wind, it quickly becomes louder as if beckoning him forward. John, John. His heart is pounding, and John freezes. Who is that? The voice bounces off inside his head. He turns back, but sees nothing. The jungle falls silent again, and the voice is gone just as it had appeared. John's head spins in bewilderment. Was it a dream? A hallucination? He is, alone in the jungle, surrounded by the dense foliage, and yet he feels that something more than mere nature seems alive in the air. Is this a sign, or just his mind playing tricks on him? The voice calls again, louder this time, almost as if it was to guide him towards something unknown. At this juncture, John is in a dilemma whether to continue to walk aimlessly lost in his fears and regrets, or to take the strange voice, trusting it may lead him to the answers he has been searching for. Is it fate, or just the whisper of his desires? Should he trust the unknown and step deeper into the jungle, or turn back to the safety of his old life? As John continues walking in the jungle, dazed by the strange voice and his own racing thoughts, he comes across an old man sitting quietly under a large tree. The sage, with his weathered face and peaceful demeanor, seems absolutely at ease in the midst of the dense and wild environment. His eyes lock with John's, and for the first time in years, John feels seen, truly seen, as if this stranger can see directly into his soul. The man says nothing at first, but there's an unsettling calmness in the air, as though time itself slows down in his presence. John, confused but intrigued, feels a strange connection to this person, despite never having met him before. How does this man know him so well? How does he seem to understand John's deepest fears without a word being spoken? How does this unknown know all that about him? What is this man's allure that has given John a kind of wait your whole life feeling? Finally, the sage opens his mouth and says softly but clearly, "You are not afraid of death. You are afraid of living. You fear the unknown, and that fear has kept you from experiencing the beauty of life. Only by embracing your fears can you truly live. You have spent your entire life hiding from what scares you. The moment you face these fears, you will finally become free." The elder's words just sank into John's mind. What do they mean? Can that be true? Is he afraid to live, not die? For the first time, John questioned everything he knew. Now the comfort he meant to find in evading his fears felt more like a trap he built for himself. A cage. The saga continues. To live fully, you must confront everything you've been running from: time, death, and the unknown. Only then can you truly be free. Could facing your worst fears be the key to truly living? What would happen if you dared to live fully? If you stopped hiding and took that first step into the unknown? The sage looks at John with wise, knowing eyes. "Now, you must choose," he says. "You can continue living in fear, hiding from the world, never truly experiencing it. Or you can embrace life fully, face everything that frightens you, and allow yourself to be transformed." John stands there, paralyzed by the weight of his decision. His life so far has been easy in many ways, safe, predictable, and free from risk. Yet it has also been full of regrets, missed opportunities, and the suffocating feeling of time slipping away. The fear that has controlled him for so long has kept him from the life he's always wanted. Will John take the chance and choose to face his fears, or will he stay in his comfort zone, continuing to live in the shadow of his regrets? John, now, determined to change, takes his first step toward embracing the life he's been avoiding for so long. It's not easy, and the fear is still there, lurking in the back of his mind. Still, he knows where to start with whatever it might be, for however insignificant he feels the change may be. The first issue is simple to start with: talking to someone he doesn't know. Years of social contact avoidance because the fear of possible rejection or even judgment were real. He pushes himself now, trying to introduce himself to unfamiliar people. A racing heart, sweaty palms mark the initial process, but it subsides. Second, he takes a risk he would never consider doing before the new life. He undertakes something wholly out of his system, a hobby, a skill set he has desired but never really dared to be interested in, learning a skill or exploring unfamiliar territories. All this while, slowly, John unwinds himself from being a prisoner by invisible chains to the same length for so many years. It feels like another victory in something bigger. What small fears do you have that could change your life if you faced them? Could you be brave enough to take the first step, just like John? John's journey into the unknown takes a dramatic turn when he finds himself in a life-threatening situation. One evening, while deep in the jungle, a sudden storm rolls in. Dark clouds quickly blanket the sky, and the wind howls through the towering trees. The once peaceful and mysterious jungle now feels threatening and hostile. The rain falls in, torrents, drenching John to the bone, and the violent gusts of wind seem to tear at him from every direction. The atmosphere becomes electric as lightning strikes nearby, illuminating the dense forest in blinding flashes, followed by the deep, menacing cracks of thunder. For a fleeting moment, John wonders if this is the test the sage had warned him about, the trial that will truly challenge him, forcing him to confront his deepest fears. As the storm intensifies, the jungle seems to come alive in a way that John has never experienced before. All the sounds are drowned out by the roaring wind, and the rain is too heavy to make him feel it, as a force against which he was pushing back. His footing was unsteady, drenched, and disoriented as he pushed through the muddy mess of chaos in the wilderness. Every step is a battle against nature itself, as he faces the raw power of the storm and the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows. John's mind runs wild, his thoughts scattered by the fear of the storm and the uncertainty of the wilderness. The fear he thought he had conquered begins to creep back into his consciousness, gnawing at him like a dark presence. And then, through the steady rain, a rustle, a sound so faint and yet so unmistakable that it makes John's spine prickle with cold. His heart lags a moment. He twists sharply, and in the flickering light there are two eyes, glowing, peering out from the darkness. A jaguar. Its body mingles with shadows. Its eyes, a pale, unblinking menace, shimmered. John freezes, unable to move, paralyzed by the horror of the encounter. He can't even breathe. His heart thuds in his chest as thoughts flash into his mind. 1,000 of them, and none are helpful. Is this it? Will he live to tell the tale? His instincts are screaming at him to run, but his legs feel cemented to the ground. It is overpowering and raw, primal. It holds him, making it difficult to think, to act. The jaguar moves slowly, cautiously, its body low to the ground as it studies him, evaluating whether he is a threat or prey. John's pulse quickens, his mind goes blank, and for a moment, it feels like the weight of his past fears, of everything he has ever avoided, is closing in on him. His body tightens, bracing for the worst. But then, something inside of him shifts. His mind, clouded by panic, clears for just a brief second. John recalls the wisdom of the sage, the lessons he has learned about living fully, about embracing fear, about trusting himself in the face of the unknown. With great effort, John takes a deep breath, focusing on the present moment. The fear still lingers, but he refuses to let it control him. His hands tremble, but he steadies himself. The jaguar is watching him, and for the first time, John doesn't see it as a threat, but as another part of the wild, another force of nature that he must respect. He does not know what is going to happen next, but he knows one thing for sure. He cannot let fear guide his actions. The storm is raging, the jaguar is near, but John's survival will depend on his ability to stay calm, to trust his instincts, and to move forward without hesitation. Will John survive this test? Can he face the real danger of nature, Or will fear win again? All of it comes to this particular moment to know if he can trust himself to behave rationally for action in the moment. Should he back out with old habits, giving way to panic, or be above it and confront for the first time in his life? This is his final test, the occasion when he will have to prove that he learned well how to live life to the fullest, without the burden of fear dragging him down. With the jaguar still observing him intently, never taking its eyes off of him, John takes a deep breath for what lies in store. At this point, amidst the chaos and during the stormy rain, and as the jaguar circles round him, something shifts inside John. The fear, the panic, it's still there, but this time he does not run. He does not let it control him. Instead, he takes a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. The sound of his own breath becomes louder than the storm. He focuses on the present moment, grounding himself in the reality that fear is just a feeling, something to be faced, not avoided. At that moment, something peculiar occurs. The fear no longer feels so potent. It is still there, but it does not immobilize him. He comes to the realization that he has deprived it of its potency by facing it head-on. The jaguar turns and walks away, sensing that John is no longer a threat to him, and John stands in the rain, drenched but empowered. The storm subsides, and so does his fear. Why does fear seem so much less scary when you face it? What is it about confronting your fears that transforms them from monsters into mere shadows? As John continues his journey, something subtle begins to change within him. He feels lighter, freer, no longer bound by the heavy weight of fear that has plagued him for so long. His mind is clearer, sharper, and his actions more decisive. He possesses a new sense of purpose inside him, quiet confidence that he has never known before. Chains of dread which once bound him are slowly falling away, and with each passing day, he feels more connected to the world around him. But something else is going on, something even stranger than anything John can fully explain. John starts noticing that his body isn't aging. At first, it's little things. His skin still looks fresh and healthy. His energy remains high all the time, and his body feels as powerful and full of life as when he was in his 20s. His reflection in the mirror, which once served as a reminder of his timeless existence, no longer shows signs of aging. This bizarre thing is unmistakable after a few months. He doesn't have any wrinkles. Nothing about his body betrays age. He feels ageless. His energy, vitality, appears not to be touched by time, and yet his mind keeps telling him that he must be getting older, that his age must catch up with him. At first, John just thinks of this peculiarity as some fluke, maybe a whim of fate. However, as the months go by and he still looks the same, his interest grows. Could it be true? Maybe facing his fears was stopping time. Maybe that ability now to live full-time without the constant heaviness of anxiety and dread is somehow affecting his body. Sounds ludicrous, yet a part of him just can't ignore the possibility. Has he unlocked somehow in embracing life in all its beautiful unpredictability and some hidden power? Could it be that to live in fearlessness can give power to almost transcend the very rules of time itself? The thought is both thrilling and terrific, and to imagine halting time or perhaps freezing it is almost too much to handle. How could it be? Could facing your fears truly have the power to stop time, to defy the inevitable march of life? Is it possible that our deepest anxieties, when confronted and conquered, hold the key to unlocking a new realm of existence, where time becomes irrelevant and our bodies remain untouched by its passage? This is something out of a dream, or so it seems, yet John watches the days go by without aging. And so there comes a point when John starts to wonder if this extraordinary phenomenon is a result of something deeper, something more profound than mere chance. As John grapples with this new reality, So the questions swirl in his mind. Is it possible? Could conquering your deepest anxieties somehow freeze the very essence of life? Could it be that the acceptance of mortality and living with the full awareness of its fragility is the key to stopping time itself? Maybe it is not time that controls us, but our perception of it. Could it be that when we stop fearing the inevitable, when we stop trying to outrun it, we unlock the secret to truly living, to existing outside the constraints of time? The more he reflects on this aspect, the more he realizes that perhaps it is not time that is standing in the way, but his change of understanding of life and death in itself. And in the move, something fabulous has happened. He is now ageless, not because time has stopped, but because he has learned to live in the moment, to hold it as it unfolds before him without fear or hesitation. Years go by, and John changes even more. He sees how the people around him grow old, his friends, his family, even the strangers he once met. Wrinkles start to appear on their faces, their steps slow down, and their hair turns gray. But not John. He stays the same. His reflection in the mirror still shows the face of the young man he once was, unmarked by time. It's a gift, or so he thinks. John is no longer afraid and has conquered time itself. He can live forever. The world opens up to him, full of possibilities. Yet with every year, a question lurks at the back of his mind. What does this immortality really mean for him? What would you do if you discovered you could stop time simply by conquering fear? Would you embrace it, or would you hesitate, knowing that something this powerful may come with a price? As John observes the world around him, a heavy burden begins to settle in his heart. His loved ones, family, friends, even pets, are aging and passing away, yet he remains the same. Immortality starts to feel more like a curse than a gift. The people he loves won't be with him forever, and yet he can never truly age or die. He asks himself, if immortality is the reward for overcoming fear, is it worth it? Can a person ever be content with living forever if they have to see everyone else around them grow old and die? John feels the burden of eternity weighing on him day by day. The realization that he will always be here, stuck in time as everyone else fades away, starts to eat away at his peace. Is immortality a gift, or is it a curse? Can it really be considered a blessing when it means losing everything you care about? Years pass, and John's isolation becomes deeper. One day he runs into an old friend, someone he hasn't seen in decades. His friend, once vibrant and full of life, is now frail and elderly. The sight hits John hard, a sudden, painful reminder of everything he has lost. His friend doesn't recognize him immediately, and when they finally talk, the conversation is full of awkward pauses and unspoken sadness. John feels a knot in his stomach as he watches his friend's health failing, knowing that his friend's time is running out quickly while he remains unchanged, frozen in the prime of his life. The guilt inside him grows stronger. He begins to realize that immortality, although attractive, has a heavy price attached to it. Forever watching others grow old and disappear. Would you want to live forever if it meant losing everyone you love? Would it really be worth it to be ageless when the people you care about aren't around to share it with you? After so long, John eventually starts to ponder whether immortality is worth paying for. John yearns to experience the small things in life, the inevitability of aging, experiencing old age as one grows, knowing that every person's existence on Earth comes to an end, exactly like everyone else's. Every passing day strengthens the burden he feels about such endless years, a lifetime full of no end. It is an odd sense of longing to witness the beauty of life's cycle, to age, and be part of this world in a way that is not isolated or separate. John realizes that immortality isn't just living forever. It is the relationships, shared experiences, and memories associated with aging. Without those, immortality feels hollow, endless, and lonely. What if immortality doesn't bring eternal life? What if it brings eternal loneliness? Would you still want to live forever and never live among others? Just when John feels he is trapped in his immortal existence, the sage reappears, as if summoned by John's deepest fears. The sage, calm as ever, looks at John and says, "Immortality is not the final gift. It's a lesson to be learned. To live forever is not the answer. The answer lies in the acceptance of life's natural cycle and in learning to live fully with time, not against it." The words of the sage penetrate deep into John. He finally comes to realize that his immortality is not supposed to be for good, but a reminder of the fact that life has no meaning if death is evaded or if it is meant to be stopped and frozen. It is all about living life, though the time might be fleeting, so that it could be treasured, and so would the people you met on the way. What does the sage mean by this? What could immortality really teach John? Is the key to true happiness in accepting the inevitability of death, or in embracing the fullness of life itself? The burden of immortality weighed on John's heart as well, but he could not close his eyes against it. So he decided to start out seeking answers. Daily, he ventures to some new place or reads old documents and finds those wise men of his age, but nothing clicks. The more John learns about it, the more he becomes clear in his head. Immortality isn't a boon. It is a test to give meaning to it and to live through it purposefully and fully live it out while facing the death that is ultimately waiting for them. John becomes obsessed with the idea that there must be more to life than just existing. The endless years stretch out before him, but he knows that without understanding the true meaning of his immortality, all of it will feel hollow. As he searches for answers, he is confronted by uncomfortable truths. His immortality is not just a gift, it's a burden. But what is it meant to teach him? Would you continue looking if you knew immortality was bought with a price? Would you want it even if it had to force some hard truths upon you regarding life and death? John searches for many years before finding the elder wise one. He has an entirely new view for him, which says, to really live forever, you must learn to experience every moment fully. Immortality does not mean living forever without purpose. It means understanding that every moment is precious, that every day is a gift. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is what makes life meaningful. To live fully is to embrace life as it comes, with all its imperfections and fleeting beauty. John is struck by the elder's words. He comes to understand that for all these years, he has been running away from the very thing that makes life worth living: fear. He was afraid that time would run out, and in his concern over this, he missed the most important part of life: living fully. He now comes to understand that immortality does not mean that death should be avoided, but instead, learning how to live well, regardless of how long or short life may be. A person can never live forever if he does not know how to live. What is the purpose of immortality if you cannot embrace the present? As the years go by, John sees the passing of time inevitable in the passing of those surrounding him. His parents grow old, then his relatives, friends, and loved ones. One by one, they pass away. He witnesses them grow old, aware that he himself would never undergo such a cycle of life. The happiness of watching his loved ones grow old together is something he would never be able to share. The most agonizing realization of all is that love, the only thing that ties life and death together, is something he can never hold on to for good. He begins wondering if being immortal is really that great. He has everything: eternal life, the liberty to travel and explore the world, and no fear of death. But besides all that, what is the point of it all without love? How can anyone live if they never get to love or lose? He finds himself missing the true meaning of being human. The life he lives feels like a cycle of emptiness to him. Would you give up your immortality in order to love and live just like everyone else? Is eternal life any good if it had to be lost for the intimacy you share with others? John breaks. These endless years weigh on him now. He's outlived all of the people he knows and loves. He has witnessed them grow old, suffer, and die. He doesn't change. Loneliness becomes impossible to bear. He cannot be anywhere without carrying the faces of the people he lost. In an attempt to fill this gap, he goes out to make friends with other people, but nothing is ever the same. His relationships are temporary, and with every year, loneliness due to immortality crushes him. He starts questioning everything. Why in the world should he want to live forever if he is stuck in a world where he was left behind as the only human being? The point of eternal life would mean nothing if he had no one to share this life with, no one to love, no one to grow old with. His immortality now was a curse to him. John is left with a horrifying question. Do you really want to live forever if it only means that you are the only one who never dies? What if you were the last one to be left? Would you still want to live forever, or would you prefer the cycle of life? On his quest for answers, John meets a man who has embraced death. He is old and weak, his body worn by years, yet there is a quiet wisdom in his eyes. He has lived a full life, and now, at the twilight of his existence, he is at peace with the inevitable end. His calmness is both comforting and unsettling, as if he has discovered something that John has been desperately searching for. You fear death, the man tells him, his voice soft but firm. But death is not something to fear. Death is what gives life meaning. Without death, there would be no urgency to live, no reason to cherish the moments we have. It is only in knowing that time is limited that we can truly live. His words echo in John's mind, striking a chord deep within him. For the first time in his infinite life, John feels peaceful. There is something profoundly calming about the man's acceptance of death. The way he speaks of it, not as an enemy but as a part of life, shifts something inside John. All these years, he had been so obsessed with escaping death, so consumed by the need to avoid it that he could not see what its true role was in the scheme of things. Death, he explains, is not something to be fought, but a part of the cycle that makes life meaningful. It is because our time is limited that we are driven to live fully, to experience each moment, to love, to laugh, to make memories. Without the certainty of death, life would be endless and without purpose, like a river with no banks to guide it. John starts realizing that immortality isn't the answer to all his problems. It may be the only thing keeping him from living at all. Since his childhood, he has been drifting through life, never able to settle or commit to anything because he always assumed he had time. He sees so many moments passing, and it's as if he is watching them go by without ever being present, believing there will always be another moment, another opportunity. But now he sees how death, in its inevitability, gives life its urgency. He has been living without truly living, for the shadow of death is not there. Immortality, which seemed a blessing once, has now become his greatest curse, preventing him from being able to live in the full splendor of the fleeting beauty of life. He begins to view death as a part of life that makes everything more precious. If life were eternal, perhaps it would lose its spark, its significance. It is the awareness that our time is finite that makes each day, each hour, each minute so invaluable. Death doesn't steal life. It highlights its worth. John realizes now that he doesn't need to escape death. Instead, he needs to embrace life with the same acceptance that the old man has embraced death. Only by accepting the fact that life does have an end can he begin to value it as it really is. What happens when you finally make peace with death? Will you be able to learn to appreciate life better, accepting that it has an end? Perhaps it is only by facing the inevitable that we can really and truly understand the depth of our existence. Would we learn to appreciate the years we have if we were to live eternally? Would we let moments slip by without noticing, thinking that there was always time to live? It is in the knowledge that time is limited that we are given the gift of really living, savoring every moment as if it were our last. And in that realization, life becomes more beautiful, more meaningful, and more precious than ever before. John's stay with the old man will always change his way of thinking. Day by day, he hears and sees the wisdom of the old man as he accepts the small things in life with so much ease. He teaches him that time is not something to be mastered or manipulated. It is rather a gift given to us all which must not be squandered. John learns that time, regardless of the amount or the lack of it, is precious. It's not about escaping time or freezing it, but about valuing every moment given to us, no matter how brief it may be. Time, which once made John afraid, now has a different meaning. He learns that every moment, whether ordinary or extraordinary, has its own value. The passage of time is a fact that no one can deny. Yet, at the same time, it's also something within one's power to make the best out of it. The old man explained that he no longer sees time as a countdown. He welcomes its passage, a beautiful cycle that brings a change in everything and everyone. The old man did not fear death because he knows that death was part of life. Moments filled his life with love, loss, laughter, and tears. All the experiences, and each second was worth it. John realizes this is what he has been missing in his life. He had become so obsessed with running away from time in trying to escape the inevitable that he forgot the beauty in the small moments. In connections with others and in being present, John is now finally transformed. He no longer harbors resentment toward his immortality because he understands its true purpose. It was not a gift, but a lesson. A lesson that life in all its fleeting beauty is worth living, no matter how brief or long it may be. He no longer fears death because he now sees it as an integral part of the cycle of life. It is death that gives life its meaning, that makes every moment more precious, more meaningful. His immortality, which he once saw as a burden, has now become a tool for appreciating the time he has, rather than fearing what he might lose. What happens when you realize time isn't something to fear, but something to cherish? When you stop measuring your days by the clock and start living them by the moments you experience, how does that change your perspective? What would happen if you truly understood the value of every second, every breath, every encounter? How might your life transform if you no longer feared the passing of time, but embraced it as the greatest gift you could ever receive? Would you live differently? Would you love deeper, laugh harder, or take more risks? These are the questions John carries, questions that reformed his conception of life in itself. And in the final analysis, it is not so much a question of how many years we might live, but how we should live the days we do, how thoroughly we should drink of the moments as they are allotted to us. John, thus far advanced along his way, feels he lacks one final item of comprehension. He's changed, but something still gnaws at him. He returns to the sage, hoping for the final answer: how to stop living in fear once and for all. The sage, with his calm presence, listens to John's worries. John asks, "How do I live without fear? How can I stop worrying about time and death?" The sage remains silent for a moment, then looks at John with piercing eyes. What does the sage tell him now? Can he again change his destiny, or does fear imprison him forever? Simple and profound, the answer the sage gives. To end fearing, one must face that which fears most frightens a man, himself dying. John is astounded. All these years he ran from death. He shied at death. He had no heart for it. But now the only way forward is to confront the one thing that has held him prisoner all this time. The idea of facing his own mortality is terrifying. Could he do it? Could he accept that his immortality was not a blessing, but a curse? John realizes that he cannot be free unless he stops running from death. He needs to confront it, understand it, and embrace the reality that nothing lasts forever. This is the bitter truth that sets him free. Can John accept the truth that immortality is a curse, not a gift? Will he finally embrace the natural order of life and death? For the first time, John allows himself to embrace the truth. Immortality is an illusion. It's not some divine gift or an escape from the inevitable. It's a fear-driven fantasy, a desperate attempt to outrun time, aging, and death. As soon as John stops trying to escape the inevitable, something miraculous happens. He begins to age again. His body, once frozen in time, gradually begins to portray the natural manifestations of aging. His hair starts turning gray and his skin becomes wrinkled, while his movements seem more deliberate, and instead of a panic, attack. He feels a great sense of serenity. After accepting mortality, John is finally unshackled from the chain of fear with which he has been held prisoner for so long. The illusion of immortality was once his biggest pursuit, but now it feels like a burden he cannot carry. This transformation, though physical, is also very emotional. With every wrinkle, every gray hair, John feels the weight being lifted off his shoulders. He is no longer trying to outrun the passage of time. He is learning to live with it, to embrace it fully. His immortality, once perceived as a gift, now reveals itself as a curse, a lesson he was never meant to avoid, but rather to understand. Time is not something to fear, it's something to cherish. The knowledge that life is fleeting, the knowledge that every moment matters, is what makes it beautiful. It is not that we live life in years in number, but about the quality spent on how people live through all those years of life. To John, such a lesson now fills him full of quiet delight. He cannot fear that he is going into the next time soon. He enjoys each passing second as they came. What happens when you stop trying to escape time and start embracing it? What is the power of accepting mortality, knowing that it's a finite journey that makes every step, every breath, all the more meaningful? John's story teaches us that life is precious, not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. And in this realization, he finds the freedom he had been searching for all along. What would it be like if you stopped being afraid of time and embraced it? How would your life be if you allowed yourself to live with the idea of death and mortality as an aspect of humanity, allowing every moment to be enough? John, having now accepted his own mortality, suddenly feels the sensation of freedom that washes over him. He hasn't felt light in years, not even a speck of the burden of fear and regret weighing on his shoulders. He stopped looking over his shoulder at the passing years, no longer plagued by the incessant ticking of the clock. Instead, John begins to experience life to the fullest in the present. The burden of past mistakes and missed opportunities slowly drifts away. His fears of time running out lose their grip on him, but in its place is planted a deep sense of excitement and joy. He is no longer living for some distant future. He's living for now, ready to take on whatever lies ahead. Each new day becomes an adventure full of promise and possibility. John wakes up every morning feeling rejuvenated and refreshed to take on the world. He understands now that life is not something to endure, it's something to cherish. He takes into himself the tiny moments that had once seemed of no consequence at all. A chat with a stranger, the feel of the warmth of the sun on his skin, the sounds of laughter through the air. Every experience becomes a treasure, and every encounter, a gift. His outlook has changed completely. He no longer views time as his enemy, but as his companion, his greatest ally in creating a life filled with meaning and fulfillment. John no longer wakes up with a knot in his stomach, worrying he will run out of time. Curiosity and excitement for what comes next are filling his life instead. His relationships deepen, passions intensify, and his wonder grows. He seeks new experiences, pushes himself to do things he feared once, and spreads his arms to embrace change. The world that was full of endless worries has become a playground of endless possibilities. What new adventures does John have awaiting him now that he is free of fear? How will he change his behavior in the world through this new vision of life? Every moment that he embraces John is transformed. Every step forward, he is discovering the beauty of a life lived fully. It begins with small pleasures, the conversations of strangers, the beauty of nature, the warmth of a shared smile. No more rushing about life. Now he takes the time to cherish all that lies before him and within him, to enjoy the fragrance of rain or the laughter in his ears, each moment precious, a gift. Time he had once been afraid of becomes the best of companions. He understands that life is not about rushing to the end, but about savoring the journey, no matter how long or short it may be. In the quiet moments of his day, John reflects on how far he's come. He remembers the man he used to be, afraid, uncertain, and filled with regret. Now, he is someone who lives in the present, fully alive and fully aware of the beauty of each moment. He realizes that the key to life is not in escaping death, but in living with intention, with purpose, and with love. How would your life change if you started living in the moment? Could you find peace in the simple things, just like John? John stands at the edge of a vast, still lake, the soft ripples moving lazily across the surface. He had spent years fearing death, thinking immortality was the ultimate goal. But now, everything has changed. He had faced the deep, raw truths of life, the beauty of impermanence, the preciousness of each fleeting moment. He realized that immortality was not about avoiding death. It was about living fully within the time you have. He had spent so many years rushing through life, constantly worried about the future, trying to outrun time. But in doing so, he missed the joy of the present. Now, armed with the knowledge he had gained, John understood that life was not measured by its length, but by its depth. The quality of the moments you embrace, the experiences you hold close. Is immortality really about living forever? Or is it about how we live the time we have? What makes a life worth living? Could true immortality lie in the legacy we create through the lives we touch, not in the number of days we have? John walks through the fields as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the earth. The sky is painted in hues of orange, pink, and purple, and for the first time in his life, he feels truly connected to the world around him. He knows that life is fleeting, that it won't last forever. But that realization doesn't make him sad. Instead, it fills him with a deep sense of appreciation. Everything is temporary, and that's what makes it so beautiful. The laughter of children playing in the street, the gentle breeze rustling through the trees, the quiet moments shared with loved ones. John now understands how precious these moments are because they won't last. He treasures them, for the transience of life lends it meaning. He no longer fears what comes after. He embraces what he has in the here and now, savoring each experience with an open heart. What happens when you embrace the fact that life is temporary? Can you live with joy knowing it won't last forever? What would happen if we stopped fearing the passage of time and started living with it instead? John returns to the town where he grew up. The streets, once full of anxiety for the future, seem calm and inviting now. Everyone notices the change in him immediately. His face, once a burden of worry, now reflects peace. The rush to get somewhere, the frantic pace of life, all seems unnecessary to him now. He speaks to people with kindness and interest, no longer distracted by the clock ticking away. John spent a lot of life running from fear of time, change, and getting older. Today, he walks with open eyes and in a different spirit. John's not afraid of time. John is no longer racing towards that place, at least some vision of what lay ahead. Now he's existing in the day, being in this hour, savoring the world for all it's worth. John's relations blossom, and so does a connectedness with another human that was unattainable before. His fear is gone, and in its place is a calm acceptance of life's natural rhythms. What would happen if you stopped fearing time? How would your life change if you embraced each day fully, without rushing through it? What would your relationships look like if you weren't constantly worried about what comes next? One quiet evening, John stands outside under the stars, the soft night air filling his lungs. Above him, the expanse of the sky. He has never felt small, in the best possible way. Finally, after so many years, he realizes that beauty is where impermanence resides. That enemy's time has turned out to be his best teacher. He contemplates on how he ran for all those years from the very thing he was afraid of, inevitable things. He remembers the moments he could have cherished but let slip by in his race to escape time. Now, with everything laid bare before him, he understands. It's not about how long we live, but how deeply we live. He's no longer afraid of what comes after. What matters now is living fully with the time he has, understanding that even a short life can be a full one. He finally realized that time is something to live with, to learn from, and to cherish instead of fearing it. What are the things when you finally embrace the truth behind life and time? Is peace possible with regard to change and its inevitability? Does true peace depend on the idea that life was not going to last forever? As John treks through life, deep inside there is a level of unshakable peace. He no longer feels the rush, no more pressure of infinite future ahead of his life. In fact, now he is all right with the simple fact that he will die sometime, and that will be fine as well. At least, so much so it makes him like every moment now. It's the warmth of a hug from a loved one, birds chirping their good morning melody, or taking an easy and peaceful walk without making a scene over anything and everyone. This is what he doesn't give much attention to nowadays, because in his view, these moments matter. To John, it isn't even an enemy when it comes to time. With time, calm is found by him that once was impossible for him to see. John now knows that life isn't about hiding from death nor outsmarting time. It's about living with it, learning from it, and embracing every second of it. Peace isn't gained from escaping something inevitable. Rather, it comes from accepting something fully. Could peace come from accepting the inevitable? What would your life look like if you stopped fighting against time and simply embraced it? How would you live differently if you knew every moment was precious, not because it's forever, but because it's fleeting? Years passed, and John's transformation became the foundation for his life's purpose. He found peace and wisdom in embracing each day, and now he wanted to pass that wisdom on to others. He began sharing his story with people, guiding them to see time not as a burden but as a gift. He spoke to young and old alike, teaching them the power of living fully regardless of how much time they had. He told other people not to let the moving clock make the decisions in one's life, but to overcome fear in order to truly be alive. Through John, his message to live and make choices rather than worrying about death told people how wonderful it would become when one gave up their time and death-fearing attitudes. John knew that the greatest gift he could give was not immortality, but the wisdom of how to live fully in the time they had. What would you teach others about life if you knew the true secret? How would you want to live if you could face your deepest fears without hesitation? What can we give the world when we stop fearing time and start embracing the present? John's life has become all this he was trained for, a symbol of triumph for everything about standing up for facing your fear and embracing what one considers little space in one's life, while at the same time relating to his precious time. Every day with the purpose for his life is brought into each passing morning without anything to lament upon because of regretting and reminding himself how little time left it was given in his case. Every decision he took was based on a profound knowledge of what is important: love, bonding, and the capability to live life without any care. He thanked God for every experience in life, the sad ones and the happy ones. Each moment, good or bad, taught him something worthwhile. And now he could say with certainty that he had lived his life, one without regret. Can you live without regrets if you face everything that scares you? How would your life change if you decided today to embrace everything you fear and live, fully without looking back? As John reflected back on his life, the old man's words rang in his ears louder than they ever had. Immortality is not escape from death. It is alive. Such words he wanted to hold into his heart very much. Many years had passed, and how much time John had spent questioning immortality versus time. He had often thought that, for a goal, immortality was the pursuit, something which should be given all of life for. But now, he realized that the real lesson was not about evading death, but about making use of the time you have wisely to its fullest potential. It is living with purpose and passion that matters. He learned that life is not about counting the years, but about making the years count. Now, he was ready for whatever came next, whether that was the end of his journey or the next step in a new one. What does it mean to really live if death is inevitable? Can we find peace in the inevitability of death and still live fully? John had started seeing time in a different way. He no longer regarded it as his enemy rushing past him and leaving him behind, but as his companion, capable of enriching his life. He used it to deepen relationships, pursue passions that he feared he would not dare to touch, and live life in ways he never imagined. He wasn't concerned with how much time he had left. What mattered now was how he used the time he was given. He spent his days savoring each moment, whether it was a quiet walk, a deep conversation, or a moment of solitude. Time had become his ally, not something to fear, but something to cherish. What changes for you when you stop looking at time as your enemy? How would your life change if you used time as a tool to live more fully instead of running from it? John's new wisdom gave him a clear sense of purpose. He no longer wandered through life, driven by fear or doubt. Every action he took, every decision he made, was grounded in a deep understanding of what mattered. Those days were long gone when he allowed time to slip away in hesitation. Now, he lived life with intention and made every moment count. Time, once his greatest enemy, had become his best friend. No longer was it a force that controlled him, but a tool he could use to make his life and the lives of others richer. With this clarity, John dedicated himself to helping others understand the importance of living fully. He became a mentor, teaching people that life wasn't about avoiding fears or escaping time, but embracing it. He volunteered, shared his story, and inspired others to face their own fears head-on, just as he had done. He created curricula for helping young people live purposefully, make choices that reflected who they were, and find a sense of meaning in every little thing. But his purpose wasn't just about teaching others, but also about a commitment to himself. John took bigger risks and started exploring more opportunities and pursued passions he used to ignore. He traveled, learned new things, and became closer to people who mattered to him. Now every day could be an opportunity to create something meaningful. Time, which had been a fast-moving force in his life, was now the foundation on which he could build his legacy. What would John do with his newfound wisdom? What would you do with your life if you knew that time was your greatest tool for creating purpose? Years went by, and John continued to live with purpose, embracing every moment and every challenge that came his way. He had learned how life was to be lived in the present time, making maximum use of an opportunity. It was not just regarding the future, nor was it about the past. However, like everyone, his time starts to wind up. Surrounded by family members and friends, John passed into eternity, calm in his heart, without one regret, but without fear, too, at what lay in store for him. For him, death was merely the journey in part, an inevitable step, but it did not end there. In the last moment, John reflected over his life. He accepted every fear, the greatest challenge, and lived what he had to the full with the time he had. He realized that how long a person lives is not relevant, but how deep one lives. And so, with a peaceful heart, he let go of his earthly existence. The legacy he left behind was one of fearlessness, love, and the importance of living fully in the time we are given. Those who knew him carried his memory forward, passing on his wisdom and teachings to others. And as the years passed, John's impact only grew. His legacy will be left behind in the people whom he touched and inspired to live life with a purpose, with courage and gratitude for time lived. What will you leave behind when your time comes? How will you be remembered? Will your legacy be one of fear and hesitation, or will it be a story of courage, of living fully, of embracing life's fleeting beauty? John's story became a legend in his town, passed down through generations as a reminder that time, though fleeting, is precious. His life wasn't just about conquering death, it was about overcoming the fear of living. His journey of transformation from a man paralyzed by time and fear to one who embraced life fully inspired many others to change their lives. John's teachings brought people out from the shackles of fearing that which was sure to happen. He showed them that it's not how long we live, but the depth of our lives. With the passage of time, John's story transcended the dimensions of being merely a tale of transformation. Instead, it emerged as a call to action, a reminder to no longer waste time by no longer fearing what is yet to be and living life with purpose now, with passion, in the present. His wisdom was shared with others as a guide for those who wanted, no longer to allow fear to hold them back. John's life had been a testament to this idea, that when we are no longer afraid of time, we no longer waste our lives. What legacy will you leave behind when you stop fearing time? What will your story be? Will you inspire others to live fully, or will you fade into the background, trapped by the fear of time and change? Though John's story had come to an end, his teachings lived on. Time, death, and fear were no longer his enemies. They had become mere parts of the journey, experiences to be embraced rather than avoided. His life has demonstrated that it's not the time that counts, but the depth with which we live it. And in that knowledge, John finally found peace. Though his physical presence was gone, his spirit lived on in the hearts of those whose lives he touched through his story. His wisdom lived long after he died. John's story was coming to an end, but the lessons he taught did not stop there. His story became a testament to how embracing life is powerful and never to be feared by time and death. His teachings inspired people to live for a purpose and to cherish each moment in their lives, never letting fear govern them again as the years passed. John's life was a reminder that true journey is not about the way one does not avoid the inevitable, but embraces the present moment in all its beauty, uncertainty, and possibility. If one stopped fearing time, death, and the unknown, would she or he have been able to live fully? Live in the present without bothering about the future or dreading the past? How would a person's life change if instead of fearing reaching a destination, they embraced a journey?